For as against generative AI as I am, there is part of me that wonders if Disney actually implements this AI feature into Disney Plus. Do you think I'd be able to get their officially licensed characters to say trans rights, or do you think they just disable that as an option right from the get-go?
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. And remember, Ashley, trans rights are human rights.
Hey there, folks. So the initial breaking of the news that Disney was looking into implementing generative AI features into Disney Plus is some weeks old by the time you're seeing this. Actually, probably about a month old, depending on the timing of when I put this out. But the thing is, it was relatively recently that I got past the what the hell are they thinking and why it's a terrible idea, though I will go over some of that, and actually seem to come to an understanding of what it is they are, in fact, actually thinking. So let's go over the basics first. Then I'll tell you what inspired this thought, and then we'll get into my full thoughts. Bob Iger, current CEO of Disney, at an investor event, told them that they were looking to integrate generative AI features into Disney Plus. Exactly what this would look like and how this would manifest is just a matter of speculation. We can infer a lot of stuff based off the generative video tools that are already out there. The obvious comparison to make is Sora or Sora 2, where the users are able to generate short form videos based off the prompts that they give it. So theoretically, any implementation of generative AI on Disney Plus would allow the users of that platform to do the same. That's really kind of all we've got, though. There is nothing laid out in specific. We don't know what features this would or wouldn't have, what restrictions it would or wouldn't have. That is still a conversation worth having because, as is rather notorious, Disney is incredibly protective of its IP and its characters and of brand integrity. Like, you can complain all you want about the direction they've taken stuff like Star Wars, Marvel, or whatever else, but they are still incredibly conscious of the integrity of the brand, even if they've taken it in creative directions that you don't like. They still value their control over it incredibly highly. I mean, half the reason the character of Donald Duck even exists is because it was determined that Mickey, as the face of the company, couldn't be as mischievous as he used to be, so they needed another character who was actually allowed to get angry and do some questionable stuff because it wasn't okay for Mickey to do it anymore. So Disney has been incredibly protective of its brand for ever. Basically forever. So the idea of kind of throwing it into the Wild West that is generative AI, where the users can put in prompts and get whatever they want, obviously that's not going to happen. The question is what restrictions will be put on it. Now, understand, you can get some restrictions. There are generative AI platforms and services out there that already have them. A lot of them have restrictions on nudity, violence, and hate speech, or at the very least, lock the ability to remove those restrictions behind a paywall, or something to that effect. That having been said, even if you are able to successfully ban the use of a character like Mickey from swearing, engaging in explicit activity, engaging in violent activity, spewing hate speech, or honestly, probably literally any political opinion. Disney probably wouldn't want them to do that. Even if you could do that, you could still, even within those restrictions, create some very brand damaging and unsettling stuff. Like, you remember a few years back when there was that big wave of really weird children's stuff on YouTube where it was just these kids' songs in the background and these CGI representations of characters like Elsa and Spider-Man, and Elsa was often pregnant and they were just weird and kind of unsettling, even though strictly speaking, nothing really truly explicit happened in most of those. Yeah, You can create some stuff that Disney would absolutely not be happy with, even with the restrictions that they would almost definitely put in place. So what would they even do? If they try and restrict it even further, then it's going to be so restrictive that even the people that might find interest in it are going to be bored, because it would start to restrict even stuff that they would think would be reasonable for them to be allowed to do. Are you going to have those kinds of restrictions on everything? Are you going to hold the leash as tightly on your princesses as you do on Mickey? What about other stuff that Disney owns? What about Star Wars? What about Marvel? Are they going to have to make arrangements with actors for likeness rights to have them be available? And if they're not available, how limited is this thing even going to be in terms of the options? All of this is speculation, and it is a rabbit hole I could go way far down on, but I'm going to stop there. My point being, it's a silly idea. And it's also a silly idea for economic reasons, because what is the actual intention of a feature like this? To be clear, we don't know how they would intend to generate money off of having this. There is, I suppose, the possibility that it could become a premium feature on a more expensive version of Disney Plus. But how many people do they think are going to pay more just for the sake of using this thing that, let's be honest, most people who are not dedicated AI fanboys tend to get bored with within a couple of days? I suppose there's an argument in favor of it being a retention item, something that helps them retain the subscribers that they have for longer and makes it less likely that subscribers might leave the service, because here's something that Disney has that, at least at present, other services are not offering and have not announced as being on the horizon. Maybe that's the thinking, but then there's the expense of it. There is no profitable model for this stuff. And we also don't know right now if Disney is creating its own in-house AI engine or if they are licensing something. But regardless, somewhere in that pipeline, whether Disney's fronting the entire thing themselves or whether they're licensing OpenAI or something along those lines, regardless of which is the case, we're probably talking a little bit about the sunk cost fallacy that I've talked about before, where they've spent all this money on this product, either developing it or licensing it, so they need to figure out as many ways to use it as possible just to justify the expense. And ultimately, for my purposes, it doesn't really matter if this is in-house or licensed. Somebody's gonna lose a lot of money with this if it actually goes live, because it's hard to quantify exactly how much money any given prompt costs, but video generation is the most energy intensive. And that cost of the server farms needed to host the ability to even do this, to generate it, to do it quickly, not to mention the energy and development costs of the AI to even exist in the first place. Regardless of what you charge, even if you charge extra for this feature, if it costs you every single time somebody generates something, first of all, users are definitely not going to pay for that. They're absolutely not going to pay for more than that so that you can make a profit on the actual generation. So no matter what your model is, you're just going to lose money. People who use it are going to cost you money every single time. You're basically looking at the MoviePass problem, where it's only profitable if a bunch of people pay for it, but then don't actually use it. Because if they use it, you lose money. So the whole thing is preposterous. It makes almost no sense, which was part of why I didn't talk about it sooner. But then I saw a video. There's a video that is the latest output at my time of talking from the channel Defunct Land. Oh, but I hate saying that name out loud. Like, I can say defunct, I can say land, but something about the unct into the defunct land. Defunct land. But I have to enunciate it so much. I hate. It's a good channel. He does good work. I hate saying it though. Anyways, he put out a video talking about the entire pursuit that Disney has had for decades of living characters in its park. And this is beyond just the idea of, like, you know, the performers in princess outfits or the wandering mascots. Those have obviously been there for ages. But something that truly feels like it is that character fully embodied, walking, talking, autonomous even. It's a very long video. I do recommend it if you feel like watching it, but it's over 4 hours long. It goes through the entire history from, the initial animatronics and stuff like Lincoln and the Hall of Presidents, up through things like Turtle Talk with Crush, and a bunch of stuff that I didn't even know about, like there was an animatronic Remy at a restaurant. There was an actual talking Mickey that was having photo ops. And then, of course, so many of the things that people thought were going to be introduced into the Star Wars portions of the theme parks. That video put a lot of stuff into perspective, because what's interesting is that for as much time and effort and money as was put into living characters as a concept and as a project, not only has it not really happened, they've abandoned pretty much every version of anything that was close to it. There used to be wandering, roving things like Muppet Labs that had Bunsen and Beaker. This was a free roaming animatronic. The aforementioned Talking Mickey. Most, if not all of this stuff was either discontinued or in many cases was never even rolled out in the first place.
This incredible aerial character was only seen one time, for one night, during a media preview for New Fantasyland. The dragon was heavily reported on by the media in attendance.
There are a ton of features that were shown as one-time events at things like investor events or press events that made it look really possible. But then when you actually got to the times when these parks opened up to the public, that stuff just wasn't there. And it was never going to be. And they knew that, but they continued to develop it anyways. And I'm looking at AI and I'm thinking, this is kind of an extension of their living characters initiative. Like in some ways, literally, because users will have the ability to prompt and get the characters to create, react, or do the thing that they asked for. It's very responsive. But as I mentioned before, it's also kind of uncontrolled. But let's go into the real thing that this got me thinking about. Because as I mentioned, a lot of these things that Disney has talked about, announced, or shown off once were at investor or press events. Where did Bob Iger announce this thing? At a shareholder event. This was not an announcement of a feature. Not really. It was an announcement of an intention and an announcement of Disney's efforts into AI. That's all that matters from the standpoint of stockholders, because they want to know what's the innovation. How are you leading the way? Because Disney as an entertainment company is about as big as it's gonna be. And most companies that are bigger than Disney are ones that are either tech-based or have a very heavy tech component. The ceiling is a lot lower on tech for what your growth could be. If you listen to tech and AI bros, they will tell you there is no ceiling. They're delusional, but that's what they will claim. And Disney, while it cannot necessarily claim realistically that it is a tech company, it wants to portray, particularly to its investors, that it is a tech-forward and tech-driven company. The idea of the living characters in the parks, which again, has not really been a thing. There were a couple of small, isolated things that were done for a year, couple years. Pretty much all of them have ended at this point. Tons of stuff was developed that was never even implemented, but it still had value if they could announce that they were trying to do this or had at least accomplished something, even if they couldn't roll it out at scale, announcing this to investors, because it tells the investors we're not just sitting on our laurels and letting things be. We are moving forward boldly. Here are the new ideas and the new things. This isn't about consumers. This isn't about the consumer experience. It's not about what consumers want. It's not even about what consumers might buy. This is about what things will excite investors. It is basically buzzwords, except they might actually try to implement it. I honestly don't know. I would not be excessively shocked if this either never manifests because they get a little bit further along and just realize there's way too many hazards involved in it. Or if it gets done as a pilot program in a couple of really restricted areas, and then they say, nah, there actually isn't that much interest. I will be very surprised. It's not impossible, but I will be very surprised if this feature actually rolls out in full. Because I don't think it was announced because Disney actually thinks that this is the future. Now, there is the possibility that some of the people up the top, maybe Iger, maybe some of the other folks who are, making the really big decisions do think it's the future, or maybe they just want to be sure that it doesn't look like they are being left in the dust. Because remember that retention thing that I mentioned? The idea that if we have this thing and say Netflix doesn't, maybe people will stick with Disney Plus. And if they're at the point where we got to cut something from the budget, they keep us because we have this feature nobody else does. The flip side of that is you don't want to be the one left holding the bag where everybody else has a feature and you don't. But again, it doesn't mean you actually have to implement the feature. It just means you have to show and demonstrate to your investors that you are not just sitting around waiting to be outpaced and outmaneuvered. You are keeping pace, if not leading the pack. That is why I think there is as much AI interest from Disney. That's not to say that they won't find some uses for it. I think concerns about them using it in animation, in special effects, is very legitimate and something that an eye needs to be kept on that. But in terms of generative AI, what would the end game of that actually be? People log on to Disney Plus, write out a prompt, and then just watch a whole movie or even an episode of a TV show that has been created based off their prompt? Do you really think that that's going to do anything past a novelty? I don't think they think that. I think they know that that's not something that would be sustainable, even if people were super interested in it, just based off of the expense alone. But even if we set the expense aside, do people want to sit down and have to think of what it is they want to watch to that extent? We already have the phenomenon of people just scrolling through Netflix endlessly because they can't decide off what's already there. You think people are going to make the decision yes, I shall come up with this 3-act structure and here's a list of characters. Yeah, again, as a novelty to a certain extent, but en masse as the new way to have entertainment? No. That's not how people work. That's not why people connect with art. Again, the tech bros will tell you that people just want what they want, and if you give it to them, they'll be happy. When it comes to art, it's not that simple. Will some people complain if they don't get what they want? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But the point of art is to find meaning because meaning was placed into it. AI cannot have an artistic reason for writing a line a certain way, for filming something from a certain angle. There's no meaning put into it. So you can't really take meaning out of it. And that's what's going to limit its use more than anything on the grand scale when it comes to creative fields. But again, I don't think Disney's actually looking to implement generative AI as a mainline feature on Disney+. I think they just need to look like they're ahead of the curve. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they're kind of hoping the bubble bursts before people start asking, hey, whatever happened with that? Then again, shockingly few people ever ask, hey, what happened with that with a bunch of their other living character stuff? Although that had the benefit of being restricted to something that was ever going to happen at their parks. This would be something available to anybody who has this service, in theory, if it were to happen. Little harder to be quiet about that, but let's be honest. If you don't see another headline about this in a year, 2 years, are you going to think to ask about it? It's to their benefit to look like they are at the forefront. They are on the cutting edge. And I would not be surprised if this kind of ties into the lawsuits we know that they've gotten involved with against, say, Midjourney. They've kind of tipped their hand. And in terms of whether or not you'd consider this brand integrity, I don't know. But in terms of audience goodwill, I'm not sure it's the best look in the world to go ahead and sue an AI image generation company for using your characters and then announce your own AI generation, basically saying, we don't have a problem with this slop existing. We just refuse to let anybody but us have money off it. Yeah, consistent with Disney? Sure. But with the attitude towards AI being what it is, and that attitude is, for the most part, not improving, especially amongst people who actually enjoy art, which would include most Disney fans, it ain't a good look. It's a calculated risk on their part because, again, it's not about the consumers. It's about the shareholders. I just wanted to get these thoughts out there because this all makes so much more sense after I watched that Defunct Land video and heard what he had to say about the way that Disney has ultimately backed off from this thing that it put a lot of time, effort, money, and press releases out about. And ultimately, it wasn't for its own sake. Like, there was still stuff that came out of it. Some of the things tested are still around. Turtle Talk with Crush turned out to be a big enough hit, and more to the point, very cheap to run, that's still around for sure. But like the core concept of what it even was, they probably realized a long time ago, this isn't actually going to happen. But they did continue to pursue it because stopping makes it look like they've given up on innovation. Not to mention, maybe they'll stumble across some other stuff that does work along the way. Who knows? Disney has the money to be able to fumble around a little bit like that. Not forever, but for now. Disney and AI generation. I don't think it's actually going to happen. And if it does ultimately not happen, while pushback against AI might be a factor, ultimately I think the actual answer will be it was never actually going to, because it wasn't about this idea. It was about dropping the AI buzzword to the shareholders. Because otherwise, shareholders are going to ask, well, wait, like, this is the new frontier of entertainment. Why aren't you doing it? Well, they can go, we are. And then they don't actually have to. Investors, I don't mean to belittle the intelligence of investors, but investors operate off of hope and what they think or want to happen, not what is actually being done, not the tangibles. It's always easy to either spook or hype investors with just words. Happens a lot. But in any case, what are your thoughts on Disney and generative AI in general? Your thoughts on my thoughts about this in particular, whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe. Those all help. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lafula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Twilord, Mystic Shadow, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and shout-outs to some random folks from the lower tiers. Thanks to Callum Ray, 3 Muppets in a Trench Coat, and Alex Fireheart. If you want to hear me thank you by name, you can check out the reward tiers on the Patreon. You guys were pretty good today. Thank you.